Paul Foster-Bell.
Tēnā koe, tēnā koutou katoa e ngā mema o te whare. So I'm sure the members brought this bill to the House with very, very good intentions, but I do want to, I suppose, respond to some of the comments she's made during the first two calls she took in this committee stage debate, but also perhaps pose a couple of questions to the member and the chair as well. Because I think despite the good intentions of this bill, if we look very closely at Part 1 and some of the amendments to the Principal Act that are proposed in that part, namely the extension of the duration of paid parental leave, the extensions that would be provided for in Part 1 obviously are those only that take effect on the 1st of April 2017, and its subsequent parts deal with the subsequent tranches or phases of extension of parental leave. But the figure that she quoted was a figure I didn't catch exactly. Maybe she would be able to just confirm something like $10 or $11 million worth of costs.
12.7.
$12 million worth of costs in the first year. But whether that figure is actually an accurate portrayal of the real costs of the provisions provided for in this part, given other estimates we have seen, show that those costs are actually compounding. They're not a one-off. They go on year after year, and they will compound up to a cost of something in the order of $445.8 million a year. At least that was the figure that the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment has provided as an estimate. I'd also like some clarification from the member of where she feels the break. She said that there would be significant cost savings which from memory were roughly twice as much as the costs of this bill that would be met by the taxpayer. Whether she would be able to provide, I suppose, some clarification for us of how realistic she thinks those cost savings calculations might be. The other question I have, and this came from the select committee stage, we heard evidence from a range of submitters, many of whom were in favour, and I will concede that. Now, I think actually people on this side of the House, there's no inherent opposition to the concept of providing paid parental leave, as Part 1 does. And actually, this government has been progressively extending paid parental leave, not only in duration, as Part 1 provides for, but certainly in breadth of availability to those who are self-employed, seasonal employees, people who traditionally weren't receiving this sort of paid parental leave support. But the question that comes from the submission, particularly the submission of Mr. Paul Clark, who is the Managing Director and owner of Ammunition NZ. It's a small business that provides essential equipment, not only to our police forces, but to our Defence Force. And he's also the chair of the Council of Licensed Firearm Owners, so someone who is well versed in the recreational shooting and hunting industries. But he made what I thought was a very good submission, which does have some material questions that are relevant to this part, around the costs on small business. Because so far in the debate we have talked about the costs and the impact on the government's fiscal outlook, potentially, and the figure that I've quoted is in the order of $450 million going forward, and that's a 4-year cost. That's not over the lifetime of this policy, but that's just within 4 years. But the points made by Mr. Clark, which I actually think do deserve a response from the member and the chair, are around the cost to small business and the calculations made by small business owners, not only the financial calculations, but the employment decisions which are influenced if they are under the understanding that they'll be they'll be required by the law to take on a considerable financial expense should one of their staff have children. So I'd like some responses from the member on those questions. As I've said, on this side of the House, we are very, very hesitant. In fact, we're opposed to the provisions provided for in Part 1 because we believe that they do represent going a little bit too far, that there is a balance to be achieved here, and that a reasonable amount of paid parental leave is something we can all agree to. But when the costs rack up into the hundreds and hundreds of $1 million per year, then that is an issue that I think we need to look at very seriously.
Jacinda,